In the heart of Georgia, in the vast sun-scorched fields of a plantation that stretched further than the eye could see, two lives began under a shadow heavier than most could imagine. They were twins, born on the same day to the same mother, yet in a world that saw them as less than human. Their births were not celebrated, they were recorded as numbers in a ledger, property rather than people. Their mother, a quiet woman hardened by years of back-breaking labor, held them for only moments before they were taken away to the overseer's small quarters. Even in those brief moments, her gaze conveyed a silent promise: survive, and maybe one day freedom will be more than just a dream whispered at night. But for the twins, survival was a daily battle against a system designed to crush spirit before it could flourish. From their first breath, the twins were marked by the cruel duality of their world. On one side was the lush golden landscape of the plantation, alive with the hum of cicadas and the scent of earth warmed by the sun. On the other side was the relentless reality of ownership, of being shackled, not in chains but in rules, expectations, and a society that had long decided that their lives belonged to someone else. They were taught obedience above all else. Every misstep, every hesitant glance was met with stern correction. Laughter was a rare privilege, tears were carefully hidden, and curiosity was discouraged, for to question too loudly was to invite punishment. Yet from the beginning, it was clear that these twins were different. Their bond was instantaneous, instinctual, almost otherworldly. Even as infants, they seemed to sense each other's needs before a cry could sound. When one whimpered, the other would stir, turning instinctively toward the sound, as if some invisible tether connected them beyond the physical. The overseers noticed it first, whispering to each other about the unnatural closeness of the children. Masters, proud and arrogant in their power, were unsettled. In their eyes, such an intimate understanding between two enslaved children could not exist naturally. It was something to be feared, something they could not control, and therefore something dangerous. As they grew, this connection became impossible to ignore. They moved through the fields with a precision that astounded the older workers. When assigned a task, the twins seemed to anticipate one another's actions, completing work together in perfect harmony as if they shared a single mind. They spoke little, for words were unnecessary. A glance, a subtle nod, or even a shift in posture was enough for them to communicate. Those who watched them began to speak in hushed tones, marveling at what they saw, yet fearing the consequences of acknowledging it openly. The overseers grew paranoid, constantly reminding themselves that no one, no matter how clever, should possess such uncanny coordination and understanding. Life on the plantation was grueling. The twins worked from dawn until dusk, bending under the weight of labor designed to test endurance and spirit. They learned to hide their strengths, to appear ordinary, to blend in while quietly perfecting their ability to anticipate and support one another. They learned which overseers were quick to anger and which could be appeased with a silent word or a careful action. They discovered that subtle defiance, barely perceptible to the untrained eye, could preserve a small measure of autonomy. In the evenings, when the other children rested, they would practice quietly, testing the limits of their connection, discovering that together they could accomplish tasks no one else could. They built small, secret victories in the corners of the plantation, moments of mastery that reminded them that, though enslaved, they were not powerless. The world outside the twins' quarters seemed indifferent to their existence, yet within it, every gaze, every whispered conversation had consequences. Rumors of their extraordinary bond began to circulate beyond the children themselves. Among the enslaved community, the twins were both admired and revered. Older children and adults spoke in reverent tones about their abilities, often cautioning that the masters would not tolerate what they could not understand. Even at their young age, the twins sensed the fear and awe they inspired, learning early that power, even in its quietest form, was dangerous when visible to the wrong eyes. They grew to move with caution, masking brilliance under the guise of obedience, a delicate dance of survival and subtle defiance. Nighttime brought its own set of challenges and revelations. In the stillness of their quarters, far from the prying eyes of overseers, the twins whispered to each other, in a language of glances, gestures, and subtle sounds that only they could comprehend. In those quiet hours, their bond deepened, transforming from instinct into deliberate strategy. They planned, in hushed tones, how to navigate the dangers of the plantation, how to protect themselves and each other. Dreams of freedom, though distant and fragile, began to take shape. Even at 13, an age when many children might merely survive, the twins were already strategists, thinkers, and observers. They were learning the rules of a world that sought to suppress them, while quietly discovering ways to bend those rules to their advantage. It was not only their bond that set them apart. There was a spark in their eyes, a quiet determination that could not be extinguished. They watched the older enslaved workers and the masters alike, absorbing knowledge like sponges, learning about human behavior, about fear and authority, about loyalty and betrayal. They realized that survival required more than strength. It required understanding, timing, and a subtle cunning that belied their years. By the time they were 13, they were no longer just children. They were beings capable of seeing the patterns of the world around them and anticipating the movements of everyone within it. It was a skill that would soon allow them to do the impossible. The plantation itself became both their cage and their classroom. They learned every inch of the fields, every hidden path, every weak point in the overseer's vigilance. They observed how the animals reacted to human movements, how the wind carried sound, how shadows shifted with the sun. They discovered ways to communicate silently across distances, testing the limits of their twin intuition. They began to understand the rhythms of the enslaved workers, the routines of the overseers, and the unspoken hierarchies that dictated life on the plantation. Each day was a lesson, each task an experiment in observation and coordination, each glance and gesture a refinement of skills that would soon make them legendary. Yet, despite their extraordinary abilities, the twins were still children, subject to the same fears and vulnerabilities as any young person. Nights were long and lonely, filled with the constant awareness that a single mistake could result in punishment or worse. They clung to each other not just for survival, but for emotional sustenance, their bond a lifeline in a world designed to isolate and control them. They learned early that trust was rare, that loyalty was earned, and that the human heart could be both a weapon and a prison. In each other, they found the rarest of treasures, an ally who understood completely and instinctively the danger and the possibility of their lives. And so, in the fields of Georgia, under the oppressive heat of the sun and the relentless gaze of their masters, two 13-year-old twins quietly began to shape a destiny that no one could foresee. Though their names were not recorded in the official documents, though their lives were catalogued as property, though the world saw them as numbers, the twins were already rewriting the rules of possibility. They were learning that even in chains, courage could be nurtured, even in silence, strategy could be honed, and even under the most unimaginable oppression, the human spirit could rise in ways that defied expectation. It was here, in these formative years, that the seeds of the impossible were planted, nurtured in secret, and prepared to one day astonish a world that had underestimated them completely. As the twins grew older, their bond became impossible to ignore, even by those whose lives were defined by control and authority. Word of their strange and uncanny connection began to ripple through the plantation, first whispered among the enslaved workers, then murmured with unease by the overseers, and finally reaching the ears of the masters themselves. There were stories, simple at first, of the twins anticipating each other's movements, finishing each other's tasks, and sharing glances that carried unspoken messages. But as time went on, these stories became more remarkable and harder to dismiss. It was not merely coordination or shared training, it was something deeper, almost supernatural. It was as if the two were linked by a thread invisible to everyone else, a bond that defied distance, circumstance, and even logic. The overseers, men trained to enforce discipline with unquestioning ruthlessness, were the first to feel genuine unease. They had grown accustomed to the obedience of the enslaved children, the predictable routines of work, and the clear hierarchy that dictated every aspect of plantation life. The twins, however, challenged this sense of control. When separated during small chores, they somehow maintained the same rhythm, their movements synchronized as though guided by a single mind. When one faltered, the other instinctively adjusted, completing the task with uncanny precision. These small miracles, repeated day after day, began to gnaw at the overseer's confidence, leaving them unsettled and fearful. They began to whisper among themselves, claiming that no human could be so attuned to another without some unnatural influence. Some called it witchcraft, others simply muttered that it was a devilish connection. The masters, proud and arrogant men who believed that wealth, power, and cruelty could bend the world to their will, were not immune to fear. When news of the twins' abilities reached them, it stirred a quiet panic. They were men who had seen insubordination punished without mercy, who had measured the worth of human lives by profit and obedience, yet here two children who seemed to operate beyond the reach of control. They tried to dismiss the stories at first, calling them exaggerations or coincidences, but their own eyes soon forced them to acknowledge the truth. Supervisors came to report, almost in fear, that the twins had completed tasks with a coordination that no training could explain, that they seemed to communicate silently across distances, that they were anticipating dangers before anyone else could see them. The masters grew defensive, issuing stricter rules, separating the twins when possible and punishing any behavior that might hint at disobedience or autonomy, but nothing could break the connection. Among the enslaved workers, the twins became figures of quiet awe. Older children and adults began to refer to them in hushed tones as the connected ones, speaking of their abilities with reverence and fear. Many feared that the masters would notice the admiration and punish them, yet even so, they could not help but watch, marveling at the twins' skill and courage. They observed how the twins moved through their work, communicating without sound, anticipating each other's needs, and always protecting one another. The bond was more than sibling affection. It was a partnership forged in the fires of survival, honed by the harshest lessons of a cruel world. And while the overseers called it unnatural, the enslaved workers understood its true nature. It was a lifeline, a shield, a secret weapon in a world designed to deny them power. The twins themselves were acutely aware of the fear they inspired. From a young age, they understood that their connection, remarkable though it was, had the potential to bring danger as easily as protection. They learned to move cautiously, to mask their abilities, and to comply outwardly even while plotting their own subtle acts of resistance. They discovered that observation and patience could be just as powerful as brute strength. They studied the patterns of their master's behavior, learning when a glance, a gesture, or a step could reveal or conceal intention. They learned which overseers were quick to anger and which could be manipulated with a word or subtle sign. Their connection, once instinctual, became deliberate, a carefully honed tool that allowed them to survive while leaving others unable to understand the depth of their skill. Even the smallest incidents began to demonstrate the extraordinary nature of their bond. When a basket of cotton tipped over in the far end of the field, one twin would instinctively reach to steady it, while the other adjusted nearby supplies without ever hearing the sound or seeing the movement directly. When one stumbled on a hidden route while running an errand, the other would stop mid-step, sensing the danger and preventing a potential injury. Observers could not understand how this was possible. The masters tried to rationalize it as coincidence or practice, but even their attempts to manipulate the twins, to separate them or assign contradictory tasks, failed. The twins adapted seamlessly, completing both tasks perfectly, as though the very concept of distance and separation had no meaning between them. To those who watched closely, it was a spectacle both mesmerizing and terrifying, a quiet rebellion that needed no words, no weapons, no open defiance. The tension on the plantation grew with each passing day. The overseer's anxiety became palpable, and the master's attempts at control became increasingly desperate. They began to experiment with punishments and separations, hoping to test the limits of the twins' connection. Yet, Each experiment only confirmed what the workers had long suspected. These children were extraordinary. No matter how far apart they were placed, no matter how meticulously the masters tried to disrupt their bond, the twins found ways to communicate, to anticipate, and to synchronize. Every failed attempt to control them only heightened the fear that spread through the plantation's hierarchy. The twins had become not only a mystery, but a threat, a challenge to the absolute authority that underpinned the entire system of slavery. This fear transformed into something more sinister. The masters began to watch the twins constantly, tracking their movements and scrutinizing every glance and gesture. They questioned the old workers about the twins' behavior, demanded explanations that could not exist, and even consulted with others outside the plantation, seeking guidance on how to break the connection. Meanwhile, the twins continued to thrive in the shadows, their intelligence and intuition growing sharper with each passing day. They learned that fear could be a weapon as well as a shield, and they began to use the overseer's unease to their advantage. A well-timed look, a subtle nod, a quiet adjustment to their work, all became part of a silent language that only they fully understood. To anyone else it appeared as ordinary obedience, but to the twins it was strategy, mastery, and survival. By the time they were 13, the twins had become more than children. They were symbols of something that defied explanation, a bond that challenged the master's understanding of human behavior, that forced even the most rigid minds to confront the limits of control. They moved through the plantation as a single unit, invisible in their skill, yet impossible to ignore once noticed. The workers whispered stories of the twins' feats, passing down tales of their uncanny intuition and silent communication. Even the masters could not erase what they had seen. They could only attempt to suppress it, to control it, to understand it through punishment, separation, or intimidation. Yet no measure could sever the connection. It was as if the twins shared a secret that belonged to no one but themselves, a force beyond control, beyond reason, beyond fear. And so life on the plantation continued, each day a delicate dance between the twins and the W. Awed around them, they grew stronger, smarter, and more aware with every passing hour. They had learned that survival was not merely about avoiding punishment, it was about understanding the patterns of human behavior, the rhythms of work and observation, the silent interplay of fear and authority. They had discovered that their connection was more than instinct. It was power, strategy, and foresight, a tool that allowed them to navigate the harshest conditions with precision. The masters, blinded by pride and disbelief, failed to recognize that these children were already rewriting the rules of possibility, quietly shaping a legacy that no ledger could contain, no punishment could erase, and no fear could break. Even in the darkest corners of the plantation, amidst the oppressive sun and the endless fields, the twins moved with a confidence and clarity that left those around them awestruck. They were children, yes, but in their minds and in their bond, they carried the wisdom of ages, the foresight of strategy, and the courage of survival. Every day they honed their skill, every glance exchanged deepened their understanding, and every quiet triumph prepared them for challenges far greater than the overseers could imagine. By 13, they were no longer merely surviving, they were defying the impossible, a living testament to the resilience of spirit, the strength of connection, and the power of intelligence forged under oppression. The plantation had long been a place of order, predictable routines, and harsh punishments, yet in its midst, two 13-year-old twins quietly defied every expectation. Their connection, whispered about in fear and awe, had grown stronger, sharper, almost preternatural. What had started as instinctual communication between siblings had evolved into deliberate strategy, honed through years of observation, practice, and survival. Every glance, every subtle gesture, every movement was measured and purposeful. And yet no one, including the masters and overseers, truly understood the depths of their bond. They had only begun to grasp the extraordinary, unexplainable feats the twins were capable of. One day, the plantation owner, a man of arrogance and suspicion, decided to test the limits of what the twins could do. He had watched with growing unease as rumors circulated, seeing the fear and admiration in both the enslaved workers and his overseers. To him, it was no longer sufficient to ignore or suppress the twins' abilities. He needed to assert control, to expose the truth behind what he perceived as unnatural. With meticulous planning, he separated the children, sending them to different parts of the plantation. One was assigned to the far fields, tending to crops under the blistering sun. The other was sent to the livestock barn, working among the animals with a task that required precision and care. The goal was clear: break their bond, prove that their connection was merely coincidence, and restore the Natu. Raoul order of authority. At first, it seemed like a simple test, one that any child could fail under the pressure of separation. The twins, however, were no ordinary children. Even apart, they moved with uncanny synchronicity. One adjusted the water trough for the animals at the exact moment the other set down baskets of cotton in the field. Their actions harmonized as if guided by a single mind. Overseers, watching from a distance, exchanged bewildered glances, muttering under their breaths, unable to rationalize what they were witnessing. The twins communicated without words, responding to invisible cues, subtle shifts, and unspoken signals that only they could perceive. Every obstacle seemed to synchronize with their intuition, allowing them to perform tasks that should have been impossible for children working independently. It was not just physical tasks that revealed their extraordinary bond. When danger arose, a loose plank threatening to topple a water bucket, a startled animal bolting unexpectedly, each twin instinctively adjusted in real time, anticipating the other's movements with flawless precision. What might have caused chaos for any ordinary child instead became a seamless dance of coordination and foresight. To the masters and overseers, it was deeply unsettling. They had tried to break the connection with separation, yet the twins continued to operate as one entity, as if distance and circumstance had no power over them. Each action seemed preordained, a careful, orchestrated performance that no adult could replicate or explain. The enslaved workers, meanwhile, observed in quiet awe. They had long known that the twins were extraordinary, but to witness such feats in real time, under direct scrutiny from the masters, was astonishing. Whispers spread through the fields and quarters, stories of the twins' ability to act in perfect unison even when separated. Some said it was a sign of divine favor, others feared it was a curse, a power beyond mortal comprehension. The workers, who understood the dangers of drawing attention, still marveled at the skill, courage, and intellect displayed by the children. They had become symbols of hope, proof that even under the harshest oppression, ingenuity, resilience, and connection could flourish. Despite their extraordinary abilities, the twins remained grounded, aware that every success carried risk. The master's eyes were always on them, searching for any evidence that could justify punishment or control. Every movement, every subtle communication had to be calculated with care. They had learned to mask brilliance beneath a veneer of obedience, to ensure that their actions could be dismissed as coincidence by those who lacked understanding. It was a delicate balance, requiring not only intuition and skill but also patience and psychological insight. The twins were no longer merely surviving. They were strategists, observing, calculating, and adapting, using every moment as both a lesson and an opportunity. Their ability to act in unison extended beyond the immediate tasks. They began to anticipate events before they occurred, noticing patterns in the behavior of overseers, animals, and even the weather. They predicted which overseer would appear in which part of the field, which animals would react to sudden noise, which tasks would be assigned, and in what sequence. It was a level of perception that bordered on clairvoyance, and it only strengthened the fear and fascination that surrounded them. No matter the complexity of the situation, the twins responded with precision, as if their minds were connected through an invisible, unbreakable link. The experiment set by the plantation owner escalated as days passed. He tested their limits further, assigning contradictory tasks that should have been impossible to reconcile. One twin was ordered to herd the cattle toward the barn, while the other had to divert water to a field being prepared for planting. To the adults' astonishment, the twins managed both tasks flawlessly, their actions synchronized in ways that defied explanation. Overseers, standing at a distance, were unable to follow their logic or comprehend the method behind their movements. The children seemed to operate on a level beyond ordinary understanding, anticipating each challenge and responding with instinctual intelligence that no adult could match. This extraordinary performance did not go unnoticed. Other children on the plantation, who had long envied or feared the twins, began to treat them with a mixture of reverence and disbelief. Even older enslaved workers, hardened by years of toil and suffering, found themselves shaken by the twins' abilities. In hushed tones, they speculated about the source of the children's power. Was it nature, nurture, or something beyond human comprehension? Could they truly communicate silently, sensing each other's thoughts and intentions? Some whispered about divine intervention, others about supernatural connection, but all agreed on one thing: the twins were unlike anyone they had ever seen. The plantation masters, meanwhile, could only respond with growing anxiety. Every attempt to assert control, to separate, punish, or intimidate only highlighted the twins' extraordinary coordination. The children's unspoken communication and precise timing rendered conventional authority useless. The more the masters tried to manipulate them, the more it became evident that they were powerless to fully control or understand these young minds. This revelation struck fear into the heart of the plantation hierarchy. They had prided themselves on absolute dominance, but here were two children who, through connection and intelligence, had become untouchable in ways they could not anticipate or suppress. In the midst of all this, the twins themselves remained remarkably composed. They understood that their connection was their greatest asset, their shield and their weapon. Every movement, every yell, and every silent cue was deliberate. They refined their ability to communicate at a distance, anticipating obstacles and dangers with flawless timing. They became masters of observation and adaptation, responding not only to each other but to the unpredictable environment around them. Their intelligence, intuition, and courage were forged in the crucible of oppression, sharpened by years of careful observation and survival. The implications of their abilities extended beyond the immediate tasks. The twins were redefining the boundaries of possibility within the plantation, demonstrating that intelligence, connection, and courage could overcome even the most oppressive systems. They were teaching themselves and those around them lessons in resilience, strategy, and foresight. Every action they took, every success they achieved in unison, was a quiet act of defiance. It challenged the assumptions of those who believed that control was absolute and that children were powerless. And while the masters could attempt to suppress or punish, they could not erase the reality of what they had witnessed. By the end of the experiment, it became clear that the twins had accomplished something extraordinary. They had proven that distance could not break their bond, that instinct and intellect together could overcome nearly any challenge, and that connection could be a source of power in a world designed to deny it. What the masters had intended as a demonstration of control had instead revealed the full extent of the twins' abilities. The overseers, once confident in their authority, now watched in silent fear and awe, realizing that these children were beyond their comprehension. The enslaved workers, inspired by what they had witnessed, whispered stories that would echo for generations, tales of two children who defied logic, expectation, and oppression through sheer intelligence and connection. And in that moment, the twins themselves understood something profound. They were no longer just reacting to the world. They were shaping it, even in the smallest ways, through their actions and their bond. They had discovered that their connection was more than instinct. It was strategy, power, and foresight, a tool that could not be measured, controlled, or destroyed. In a world designed to break them, they had found a way not only to survive but to excel, to challenge the assumptions of those around them, and to achieve what no one thought possible. Their bond, tested under pressure and scrutiny, had emerged stronger than ever, a testament to courage, intelligence, and the indomitable human spirit. By the time the extraordinary feats of the twins were fully revealed, The plantation had become a place of tension, whispered fear, and awe. Stories of the children's uncanny abilities had spread far beyond the quarters, carried on the lips of the enslaved workers, and even reluctantly admitted by overseers. No one who witnessed the synchronized actions, the silent communications, or the precise timing could deny that something impossible was unfolding before their eyes. Yet, what astonished most was not just the skill itself, it was the sheer audacity with which the twins operated, the courage they displayed in a world that demanded submission and punished brilliance. For the enslaved workers, the twins had become more than children. They were symbols. Whispers of their feats traveled from field to field, spreading like fire. Mothers spoke of them in hushed tones to their daughters, and older brothers nodded with recognition, impressed at how the twins anticipated and reacted to events in ways that defied explanation. Each time the children performed a task, whether tending animals or managing chores in perfect unison while separated, the observers felt a mixture of astonishment, hope, and fear. They had rarely witnessed such coordination, such intelligence, or such courage, especially in children. The twins seemed to exist in a space that transcended ordinary life, a realm where instinct, intuition, and understanding converged into a form of power that could not be contained. Even the overseers, men whose authority had long been absolute, could not escape the growing fear. They had spent years enforcing obedience through punishment, intimidation, and manipulation, yet here were two children whose actions defied their every attempt at control, attempts to separate them, to assign contradictory tasks, or to punish perceived disobedience. Led time and again. The twins adapted flawlessly, completing tasks with precision, anticipating dangers, and communicating in ways the adults could neither see nor understand. The overseers began to murmur among themselves, questions laced with unease creeping into their conversation. "How can this be?" one would ask. "It's impossible." Another would reply, though their tone carried more fear than certainty. The twins had become a puzzle the adults could not solve, a phenomenon that exposed the limits of authority and understanding. The masters, too, were forced to confront what they could not ignore. The plantation owner, who had once believed that control and fear could bend every life to his will, now grappled with an unsettling reality. His children, his overseers, even his own sense of order seemed powerless against the bond of these young twins. Every task assigned, every effort to disrupt their connection had been met with flawless execution. Every observation, every test, every attempt to break them only confirmed the children's abilities. In private, he wrestled with disbelief. Could it truly be coincidence? Could it be nature, nurture, or a trick of perception? No. The twins were performing acts that no rational adult could orchestrate. Their union was seamless, almost eerie in its precision, and entirely beyond the comprehension of those who sought to dominate them. Neighbors and visitors to the plantation began to take notice as well. Tales of the twins' extraordinary coordination spread quietly through nearby towns and farms. Some who observed from a distance swore it was a miracle, a sign of divine favor, an inexplicable talent that shone even under the harshest oppression. Others whispered warnings of a curse, fearing the unknown, fearing what they could not control. The twins became legends. In their own lifetime, the subjects of awe, speculation, and superstition. Even among adults hardened by hardship and cruelty, people felt the undeniable pull of curiosity, and perhaps a tinge of envy, when they watched the children operate as one. In their abilities, the twins had claimed a kind of freedom within the confines of bondage, a power of mind and connection that the plantation walls could not contain. What made the twins' achievements all the more extraordinary was the subtlety with which they executed them. No loud declarations, no brash acts, no open defiance, only flawless, silent mastery. When a basket tipped over, the twins adjusted instinctively. When a plank threatened to collapse, one would react as the other prepared a countermeasure. Every action was precise, almost choreographed, and yet entirely natural. Observers were left questioning their own perceptions, unsure if what they had witnessed was real or imagined. For the masters, this uncertainty was intolerable. They were men used to power, used to absolute authority, yet here were two children whose very presence challenged their understanding of reality. Each demonstration of skill became a reminder of the limits of control and the unpredictable nature of human potential. Even within the enslaved community, the twins' abilities inspired both caution and courage. Older workers recognized the danger of drawing attention to the children's feats, masters who feared the twins might retaliate if they were too admired. Yet the workers could not help but marvel at their intelligence and coordination. The twins had become symbols of hope, of resilience, of ingenuity, proof that even under the most brutal oppression, the human spirit could rise. In quiet moments, mothers would gesture toward the twins when speaking to their children, pointing to the lessons of courage, patience, and strategy that the twins embodied. It was as if the children carried a secret knowledge that could not be taught, a gift born from adversity, observation, and an unbreakable bond. The twins themselves were acutely aware of the fear and admiration they inspired. They understood that their connection, remarkable though it was, could be dangerous if misunderstood. The masters were unpredictable, and punishment could come swiftly for even the smallest misstep. Every glance and gesture had to be calculated, every silent communication measured to avoid detection. Yet this awareness did not diminish their skill or courage, it sharpened it. The twins learned to navigate the delicate balance between visibility and concealment, between action and inaction, between obedience and subtle defiance. They became masters of perception, adapting constantly, observing and predicting the behavior of everyone around them. Their bond was not just emotional or instinctive, it had become tactical, a tool of survival honed to perfection. And so the legend of the twins continued to grow. Every successful task, every synchronize. Movement, every silent communication became a story in itself. Overseers, masters, and neighboring witnesses alike began to speak in hushed tones, describing acts they could not explain, actions that defied reason, and a connection that seemed supernatural. The twins had achieved something far beyond ordinary skill or childhood ingenuity. They had become a phenomenon, a living testament to the possibilities that emerge when courage, intelligence, and unbreakable connection meet adversity. The implications of their feats extended far beyond the immediate confines of the plantation. By existing as they did, observant, strategic, and flawlessly coordinated, the twins had begun to challenge the very foundations of power and control. Authority, once absolute, could not fully account for their abilities. The masters could not understand, the overseers could not anticipate, and the workers could only watch with a mixture of fear and admiration. In this way, the twins' achievements became more than survival. They became a quiet rebellion, a statement of autonomy and power that no adult could suppress. Even in the face of disbelief, the twins remained composed. They did not boast or demand recognition. They did not act recklessly or draw attention unnecessarily. Every success was silent, almost invisible, yet impossible to deny. In their mastery of synchronization, anticipation, and communication, they revealed a level of intelligence and courage that far exceeded their age. And while the adults around them struggled to comprehend what was happening, the twins themselves understood exactly what they were achieving, a proof of possibility, a defiance of expectation, and a quiet, unassailable demonstration of their power. By the time the sun set over the fields, casting long shadows across the plantation, the story of the twins had become impossible to ignore. Witnesses spoke in awe of the feats they had seen, some with reverence, some with fear, and some with envy. The overseers, once confident in their control, now felt unease that would not leave them. The masters, though outwardly composed, privately questioned their assumptions about obedience, authority, and the limits of human potential. And the enslaved workers, inspired by what they had witnessed, began to pass the story along, embedding it in whispered legends that would endure long after the children's immediate presence. In these moments, the twins had achieved what no one believed possible. Their bond, tested under scrutiny, had proven stronger than separation, stronger than fear, and stronger than authority itself. They had demonstrated that intelligence, courage, and connection could exist even in the harshest conditions, that children could operate with skill and strategy beyond the comprehension of adults, and that the impossible was possible when guided by unbreakable trust and instinct. It was a quiet revolution, invisible to those who sought to dominate them, yet undeniable to anyone who had witnessed it. By the end of that period, it became clear that the twins were no longer merely children on a plantation. They were a force, a symbol, and a mystery. Their actions had inspired hope, fear, and admiration. They had challenged authority without words, defied logic without argument, and shown that the bond between them was not merely familial, but extraordinary in its power. Witnesses, unable to explain what they had seen, swore that the twins' abilities were beyond human comprehension, and many would remember those days for the rest of their lives. And in the hearts of the twins themselves, a quiet understanding took root. They had discovered the impossible within themselves, and nothing in the world could take that away. The days that followed the twins' astonishing feats were marked by a growing unease across the plantation, an invisible tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the sprawling fields and quarters. Word of their impossible abilities had spread, whispered by the enslaved workers who marveled at their synchronicity, their intuition, and their courage. Overseers carried reports back to the masters, each one more astonishing than the last. The plantation owner, once confident in his absolute control, now found himself grappling with a reality that he could not command. The twins had done what no adult could imagine. They had shown that connection, intelligence, and courage could flourish even in the harshest conditions, that the human spirit could rise beyond boundaries imposed by chains, rules, and cruelty. In the eyes of the masters, the twins represented a threat. They were a puzzle they could not solve, a phenomenon they could not break, a defiance of the rigid hierarchy that underpinned the plantation. The children had demonstrated time and again that they could work in perfect harmony, even when separated, anticipate dangers before they occurred, and execute tasks with precision that defied logic. Every attempt to assert control through punishment, separation, or intimidation had failed. Each failure only reinforced the twins' mastery and deepened the fear in those who sought to dominate them. The overseers, once confident in their authority, now watched the children with a mixture of suspicion and terror, unsure of how to respond to the impossible. Among the enslaved workers, the twins had become legends. Mothers whispered their stories to their children, cautioning them to observe but not draw attention, to admire but not provoke. Older workers, hardened by years of toil and suffering, shook their heads in disbelief at the precision, courage, and intelligence displayed by the children. The twins' feats were more than physical skill. They were strategic brilliance, a quiet mastery of anticipation, observation, and communication that allowed them to operate in a world designed to deny them power. The workers began to see in the twins a glimmer of hope, a symbol that survival, ingenuity, and resilience could coexist even under oppression. Yet the reality of their existence remained perilous. The master's fear was not merely of their abilities, but of what those abilities represented. The possibility that control was not absolute, that the system of ownership and domination could be challenged even by the youngest and smallest of individuals. The twins had, through sheer instinct, intelligence, and connection, demonstrated a form of power that could not be catalogued, sold, or punished. And because this power existed within the children, it was invisible, unquantifiable, and terrifying to those who had built their lives around authority and control. It was during this time that the masters made a fateful decision. Fearing the spread of stories and the potential influence of the twins, they removed all references to the children from the official plantation records. Names that had been recorded as mere property, already stripped of identity, were erased entirely. Observers from within the community were warned not to speak of the twins, and attempts were made to suppress the whispers that had already spread across the quarters. In essence, the twins were being erased from history, their existence reduced to whispers, hidden glances, and the memory of those who had witnessed their impossible feats. But even as the masters sought to erase them, The children's legacy was taking root in ways they could not control. In the quiet corners of the plantation, the twins continued to act with the same precision, intelligence, and courage that had become their hallmark. Their bond, now tested by scrutiny, separation, and the threat of erasure, had only strengthened. They had learned that survival required more than obedience. It required observation, anticipation, and strategy. Every movement was deliberate, every glance calculated, every gesture a form of silent communication. They had discovered a power that no chains could contain, no authority could suppress, and no fear could destroy. In each other, they had found a lifeline, a weapon, and a sanctuary. Even as time passed and records were erased, stories of the twins persisted. Among the enslaved workers, tales of their abilities became legend, passed down quietly from one generation to the next. Mothers spoke of the twins' courage and precision to their children, recounting the moments when two children had defied logic, expectation, and authority. Overseers who had witnessed the feat spoke in hushed tones, their fear and awe lingering long after the children had completed their tasks. The legacy of the twins became a silent rebellion, a proof that the human spirit, when united by connection and intelligence, could achieve the impossible. The twins themselves were acutely aware of the precariousness of their situation. They had achieved feats that no one believed possible, yet they understood that their survival depended on discretion, subtlety, and careful planning. They moved with quiet mastery, masking brilliance beneath the guise of ordinary children, yet executing tasks with unmatched precision. Their intelligence and intuition, honed through years of observation and adaptation, allowed them to navigate dangers that would have overwhelmed any other child. They had discovered that true power often lay not in confrontation, but in anticipation, understanding, and the ability to act with perfect timing. The story of the twins did not end with their erasure from official records. In the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed their abilities, the legend lived on. The enslaved workers carried the memory of their precision, courage, and uncanny connection, embedding it in whispered stories, quiet admiration, and subtle inspiration. The twins had become symbols of possibility, proof that intelligence, strategy, and connection could defy even the harshest oppression. Even when erased from the pages of history, their actions had left an indelible mark on the people around them, a reminder that the impossible could exist in the smallest and youngest among us. Historians would later struggle to find evidence of the twins' existence. Plantation records were incomplete, names had been erased, and the stories survived only through oral history and private recollections. Yet even in the absence of documentation, the truth of what the twins had achieved remained. They demonstrated that connection between human beings could transcend distance, that intelligence and courage could flourish even under oppression, and that the bonds of family and instinct could become a force powerful enough to challenge authority itself. The twins had done what no one believed possible. They had turned fear into awe, obedience into strategy, and connection into power. In the broader context of history, the twin story serves as a reminder of the countless lives erased, the extraordinary achievements lost to time, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. Their ability to perform the impossible, even under constant surveillance and threat, reflects a level of courage, intelligence, and intuition that is rarely recorded but never forgotten. The twins were a living testament to the capacity of the human mind and heart to adapt, survive, and excel, even in a world determined to deny them both recognition and freedom. Even today, in the quiet corners of old plantations, in stories passed down across generations, and in the hearts of those who remember the whispers of the past, the twins' legacy endures. They were more than children. They were innovators, strategists, and symbols of defiance. Their bond, tested under scrutiny and adversity, had survived every attempt at erasure. Their feats remained impossible, their courage unmatched, and their story a testament to the power of connection, intelligence, and resilience, Though history attempted to bury their existence, the twins had proven that some truths could never be fully erased, that extraordinary ability could not be contained, and that even in the harshest conditions, the human spirit could achieve what no one else believed possible. And so, in the fields of Georgia, in a time when human lives were measured in profit and obedience, two 13-year-old twins quietly changed everything. They turned separation into synchronization, fear into awe, and impossibility into fact. Though their names may have been erased from official records, their story, their legacy, and their extraordinary bond continue to resonate across time. A reminder that courage, intelligence, and connection are forces that no oppression can fully extinguish. The twins, born into chains, had achieved the impossible, and in doing so, they had left a mark on history that could never truly be erased.